Okay, in this part of the lesson plan, we are going to set up Spring Boot for Java on our local machine. So let's open up a browser. Where's my browsers? There you go. All right, open up a new tab, and we're going to type Spring Boot Initializr. So it's initializer's not spelled out all the way. It looks like it's missing an E. So go ahead and click on that. Now, I think the lesson where we set up the machine is either using Java 21 or Java 17. So whichever one you have installed is the one you should download. Let's go ahead and go into Spring Initializr here, and then you'll see what I'm talking about. All right, so there's a couple things for Spring Initializr. Now what this thing does, it's a website that builds our project for us. So it'll go ahead and give us a zip file of all the stuff with the project structure and everything that we need to get started. There's a couple of options. So on the top left, there's project, and I don't know why it's called project, but basically what we're doing is we're building a Maven project. So you're going to want to head and make sure that Maven is the one that's checked. And as far as language goes, we're going to pick Java. And then as far as the Spring Boot version goes, we're going to just go ahead and pick the current one. These are snapshots or things that are greater than this one. This is the stable release. So we're going to pick that. So that's all good. So those are the defaults. At least I think they were the defaults. If they're not the defaults for you, go ahead and click those. All right, so project metadata. This is specific to our project. For me, example would change to full stack cloud developer. Cloud. Like that. And so whatever your domain is that you're working on, some of you probably aren't, right? Because we're trying to do a free one thing without domain. And we're just learning. So don't unless you actually are making this for yourself, don't waste the time and the local part of it on your machine to build this that way. So just go ahead and leave it as example. That's fine. I just wanted to show you what you would do if you were making it for, I'm not going to say for real because we are making this for real, but you don't have to waste it on this because we're not going to publish it with on the internet or anything else like that. It's just going to run on your machine. So it's okay to leave it the way it is. Artifact demo, what I would typically put is blog, maybe blog editor. So something like this. And we could go ahead and do that because, oops, I got to spell it right. We could do that because we are going to run this here. So blog editor and com.example is fine. What's the description? This is a blog editor for GitHub hosting. Okay, so now what our package name is going to be is com.example and then blog editor. All right, packaging, jar versus war. So a war file is something that it's a web application archive and it gets published into a web application server. We're going to pick jar file because with Spring Boot it's going to be built in. Now the default is 21. If you have 17 installed, then you'll pick 17. I've got 21 installed. Actually, I have them both installed. But I'm going to go ahead and pick 21. If you have 17 installed, pick that. And then over here on dependencies. So dependencies, we're going to want the web dependencies. So you just go ahead and click on this button and then type in web right here. And Spring Web is going to be installed as a dependency, and I'll show you what that means in a moment. What Spring Web does is it gives us the ability to make the API, basically, is what we're going to do here. So let's click that. Okay, so we've got that all set, and we're going to hit generate. So that just downloaded, you can see here, it downloaded blog editor-zip. So that's going to be in my downloads folder somewhere. And we'll go here. So here's the zip file. So what I like to do is double click on it to open it. I see that blog editor is already a folder in there. So now when I go to downloads to extract this, when I extract, I will get rid of the redundant folder because Windows is going to try and help us and put this there. But there's already one of those in there. Sometimes zips do, sometimes they don't. So then I'll just go ahead and say extract it to downloads and it'll create the folder. And there's our blog editor folder. Okay, so now I'm going to open that editor in VS Code. And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to right click on this folder. And you see all the options here. On show more options, I'm going to pick open with code. And then you trust, do I trust all authors and downloads? Probably not. I mean, it's me downloading it. I should know better, but I'm not going to trust them. but I trust the authors this time. Okay, so here we are. We're in VS Code. So VS Code's a very nice code editor from Microsoft Visual Studio Code, and we don't need the welcome here. So I just close that. And then here's the layout. So what Spring Boot Initializr did is it gave us all these files and folders to start us off with a Maven Java project. So if I click on pom.xml here, this is what I was talking about when I said dependency. Let me close some of these other dialogues. I'm just going to X them to get them out of the way. They don't need to be there. This one's opening the project. So if you've installed from the video, there's the Java extension packs installed. So it's initializing this project. Oh, and then it's got another dialog to get rid of. Okay, so there we go. So this POM file is a definition of a Java project for Maven. So Maven Java project. And there's a couple things in here. The version, here's the artifacts that we just set up, right, with blog editor. There's a description that we put in. And then here's our Java version 21. You might have picked 17 if that's what you have installed, but I picked 21. And then here's that dependency that we added. So the way a POM file works for Maven is it's got the project definition. Usually you can put it anywhere, but usually put it at the top. And then your dependencies are in a section that have a list of the things that you bring in. So we brought in web, so that way we can make a website stuff. We could have typed that out ourselves, but it's not much easier to use the dependency, which is a set of code that's already been created, that's put somewhere on GitHub or some other server, and we can just download it and use it in our project. In this case, it's from Spring. Say we were going to use Stripe to take payments, like maybe we're making an online store, or maybe our blog, we want to sell t-shirts or something like that on our blog. So say we'd want to use Stripe for processing credit cards, we would bring in the Stripe dependency for Java that would allow us to interact with Stripe for credit cards. So that's what a dependency is. And then down here are plugins for the build. Right now it's using the Spring Boot plugin, which allows us to run the project and everything else inside that. A Maven project can get very complex inside, but as long as you know what you're doing, it's not too bad. It's XML. So it looks similar to HTML, but that's pretty much the POM file, and you won't really need to go in here much. When we add, say we do add Stripe processing for, oops, I just hit a wrong key. Say we do add Stripe processing for credit cards, we would come in here and add that dependency. Then that's pretty much the only time you come in here. It's when you're adding something new like that. Okay, so what else did it do for us? It brought the Maven executables for Windows and for non-Windows, and help.markdown. So it made a markdown for us for help. I don't know what's in here. I've never really come in here. I was just telling us what to do for getting stuff running. Okay, and then we've got a source folder. So inside the source folder, we've got main, and this is not the one I was expecting, because how would it do that? Ah, no, there you go. So what it did is it took what we said our application name is going to be and turned it into blog editor application. So it actually renamed that and everything, got us up and running. So that's really awesome. We've got debug and run menu options here. This is part of Visual Studio Code's Java extension pack plugin. That's not normally there. If you don't have the plugin, you won't have this, but we're going to run it from here. What's nice about debug is you can go through and step through the commands. So if you want to test our post method when we're going to get there, we're definitely going to probably debug it to see what's going on, because things don't usually work the first time. It's going to take a couple of iterations to get it right. So what I do is I put a breakpoint in the code, and you'll see this when we do that. And then I step through it. And that's what debug does. Forget I said that much of that. Forget any complexity around there or any mystery around there. We'll get there when we get there. And this is kind of a preview for debug. And anyway, that's where we're going to run it with debug. Okay, so resources and static. This is important for us, because in here we're going to actually run our website for not the blog, but for the blog editor in static. And I'll show you how that works in a moment. So let's go ahead and run this really quick. We're going to click debug right here. And then you'll see a terminal window pop up and a bunch of stuff happen in here. Spring Boot started or starting, and it's going to start soon. Okay, here's the thing. You're going to see Spring Boot started on port 8080 right there. So it's running locally on port 8080. What we're going to do is go over to a browser. We don't need Spring Initializr anymore, so I'm just going to take this one. All right, localhost, that's your local machine. And then 8080 is the port to your local machine. This is going to throw up an error, and that's okay. That's expected. So we know that the server's running. If it didn't throw up an error, it would just sit there and spin, and that meant that our server's not even running. But we got an error because there's nothing for it to do at /, and there's nothing for it to do anywhere else that I know of. So we're going to give it something to do. And let's see, back to our editor. We can just leave it running, in fact. I don't know if it'll pick up the page now. It does pick up pages, but I don't know if it'll pick up a new one here. Let's find out. All right, so I'm going to right-click there and do New File. Actually, I'm going to do, let's do New File. Okay, and we're going to call it index.html just like we called our other one, because that's going to be the start page. And now we've got that. So we're going to do the same thing that we did before with doc type. And we're going to start an HTML here. And same exact stuff. So this is good practice to do this again. So a head. And that's where a lot of the non-visual stuff goes, like title. And so title is visual. It's going to be the thing that shows up in the tab. So let's call this one blog editor. Okay, and that's what's going to show up in the tab. And then we need a body. And let's do an H1. Same thing that we did for hello. This is usually where I start because I just want to see something show up. And this is a pretty quick thing. So Visual Studio Code helps us type. And sometimes I forget that. So then I'll just save. I have a habit of putting a new line down at the bottom here on GitHub when you're looking at pull requests, which is when you're bringing in new code and you're going to merge it with the main branch. And I'll explain this later on. It shows at the bottom, and it's got a little red circle that says, hey, you don't have a new line at the bottom. It's some kind of standard. So I'm just adhering to that, and it's a habit. So if I don't see this down at the bottom, I usually add it. So now you know why. All right, so let's see. We've got index.html in static. I don't know if it's going to show up or not. We should be able to just refresh. I know it works with changes, but I don't think it works with a new page that just got added, especially the index page. It might work with subsequent pages, but let's find out. So if I refresh, okay, that's not working. Let's see if we can access it directly. Okay, we can access it directly. I want to see if we can get it to work with it blank, because if this happens to you, you'll need to know what to do. All right, so we're there, right? We didn't get our page to show up, even though it's here. Let's stop this by hitting that orange square. It's kind of like a VCR, if you guys remember what a VCR is. And I just hit the stop button. So now to restart it, I'll just go back to the blog editor and click debug again. And now Spring Boot's probably going to recognize that index page and say, oh, I've got a start page. Okay, running on port 8080 again. Let's see. Okay, it worked. So now we've got hello. And so the reason I don't have to type index.html or /index.html is because the default document is set, and it's usually defaulted to index.html. So by creating an index.html file, I don't have to specify that. And you'll see that on many websites that you go to. Say you went to Bloomberg.com. They have an index page, some default thing. It doesn't have to be index.html. They could change it to something else. But typically it's index.html. And all you see is Bloomberg.com. You don't see /index.html. So that's the default document. And we just created one of those. Okay, so that is getting Spring Boot up and running. We're ready to go on the next step. So see you in the next lesson.